Hi, my name is Phil. I like to talk about politics, and it's been fairly clear since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister that he's been working towards a Brexit without any arrangements with the EU at all, at least not on trade. In this video, I'd like to discuss his latest statements making clear that he will be pushing for a no-deal Brexit if he wins a majority in the general election next month. But first, if you want to receive notification for future uploads, please click the subscribe button and the bell notification next to it. So with Parliament blocking Boris Johnson's illegal attempts to take us out of the EU last month, he's now set his sights predictably on another route to the no-deal Brexit cliff edge. This was done through his doctored version of Theresa May's withdrawal agreement. In it, and the accompanying withdrawal agreement bill that he produced, he sets out a transition period in order to arrange a comprehensive deal with the EU with a deadline of the end of 2020. Now, how this differs in the approach to the transition period with Theresa May is that Johnson's version is a hard deadline. If it isn't extended in the middle of next year, it's not going to be extended. And the decision to extend or not is entirely down to ministers, not Parliament as a whole, at least from the UK side. In addition, Boris Johnson has announced yesterday that he will not extend the transition period beyond the end of 2020. And he's saying that now without knowing how the next 6 months of negotiations would go if his withdrawal agreement bill was passed, which is basically to say he does know how they'd go because he's not going to send anyone to really negotiate, just pretend to. And it was obvious that this was intention really from the wording of his agreement and the bill, and from his reaction when Parliament tried to amend it, not least by saying, can we have some time to read it first? But he has now stated it clearly, or at least his government have, via ministers Michael Gove and Liz Truss. So the only way you could now believe that Boris Johnson actually intends to get a deal with the EU is if you're gullible enough to think that he and his cronies will negotiate a comprehensive deal covering trade and other aspects of international cooperation, including security matters, within 1 year. In fact, less than a year, because that process can't be begun until we've actually left. And even with a majority, he's going to struggle to get his bill through before the new year. Now, to do this would represent the most comprehensive deal ever negotiated, and we're expecting to do it in 1 year? Of course not. It's ridiculous. And if you're not convinced, look up how long trade deals actually take. You don't even have to look up the average. Look up every trade deal that has ever taken place. Even relatively straightforward ones, if there is such a thing, take years, with some taking a decade or two. And we're not just talking about trade. Remember, that's just the aspect of the deal that is foremost in the minds of the public, who often don't consider everything else that we get from cooperation with our neighbours. The only other possible explanation for the government's statement today are that Boris Johnson and his cretinous cabinet think that they can get a deal in a year and just don't understand the realities. Oh, well, maybe when they see they can't, they'll extend. No. Because that is to believe that the Prime Minister you're supporting is utterly clueless about the task at hand. In which case, how can you support him? So no, anyone supporting Johnson after this announcement is supporting a no-deal Brexit. Pure and simple. Whether you are a voter or an MP, that's whether he's after it, and it couldn't be clearer. You know, the only way you could possibly support him, in the belief that he will look after the interests of the UK, is if you are extremely ignorant and dim. And I say and dim because this level of ignorance can only come from someone who does not have an inquiring mind. But if Boris Johnson couldn't get his no-deal Brexit last month, could he really manage it next year? I mean, yes, Boris Johnson's withdrawal agreement bill removes the extension powers from Parliament, but they could just take them back, couldn't they? Yes, in theory they could. There is no UK legislation that Parliament cannot choose to repeal or amend as it sees fit, when it sees fit. And this is what has been done to block Johnson's schemes, and Theresa May's schemes, I suppose, before that, so far in 2019. But Boris Johnson was pushing for a general election so hard in order to get a working majority in the House of Commons. The only reason why we've had these battles between government and Parliament in this year is because the Prime Minister does not have the loyal support of a majority in the House of Commons. Normally, Prime Ministers in this country do, and so they get almost anything they want when they want it. So if Boris Johnson wins a working majority, he would not only get his withdrawal bill passed without any amendments, but also in a few days, so there couldn't even be any serious scrutiny of it in debates or committees. In addition, when we're halfway through 2020, his team will have made zero progress on negotiations, and it becomes obvious that we aren't going to have a deal by the end of the year. He will just make the unilateral decision not to extend, and we will be powerless to do anything to change the inevitable course to a no-deal Brexit that awaits us 6 months later. It'll be like watching, literally, people have used it before, but this will literally be like watching the slowest car crash in history. With a working majority, he will be in power for another 4 years before the electorate can do anything about it, no matter how far bad it goes wrong, unless, of course, there's a major rebellion in the party. But even if Boris Johnson gets a majority, that doesn't necessarily mean he'll automatically get his way next year. Conservative MPs are not always going to vote the way the leader wants. They didn't for Theresa May over Brexit, nor for Boris Johnson, even with his threats. So surely they'll rebel against him next year when it becomes clear what he's going to do. Well, this is possible because even if he gets a majority, and I still think it's unlikely, but it is possible, there's no point in denying that, you can't really see him getting a hefty majority. Now, when you've only got a small majority as a government, then the backbenchers have power. Your rebels have power. They can't simply be cowed by the fact that rebelling against you isn't going to do any good anyway, and you're just going to get punished for it. However, he has his general policy of chasing out moderate Conservatives and encouraging hardline candidates to stand for the party's seat. This has the dual advantage of making the party appealing for those who would otherwise vote for the Brexit Party, which is basically his plan, assuming that they even field candidates against them, which remains to be seen, never mind what they say. But also, it has the advantage in making them much more likely to support his hardline on Brexit. If you get a load of extremists in Parliament, they'll vote for extreme policies. So his plan is to get a majority of crazed loons that will pass anything he tells them to. It's not guaranteed to work. Apart from anything else, he's not guaranteed to get a majority of any kind, and as I said, I don't actually think it's likely, but it's just a serious risk that we have to take seriously. It is possible, and it is possible that his majority would back him no matter the consequences to the country. Remember, we've already had MPs backing his withdrawal agreement bill that know it's going to be very damaging and it doesn't do them any good personally, but they believe it does them good politically. The same may hold sway then. And this is why I describe this general election as Brexit dominated. You might imagine that's a reference to the fact that a lot of people are going to be making their general election votes based on Brexit. This is true, but that's not why I say it. I don't do it because it's based on the people, but because the resulting parliament will determine how Brexit unfolds in 2020. There's a huge range of options, and it's all based on the parliamentary arithmetic on, I suppose we'd say Monday, December the 16th, because the day after the election, if it's a hung parliament, it'll still be to determine where the power lies. If Boris Johnson wins, then we not only end up leaving the EU, but on a course that leads to ruin for the country in 2021. If Johnson loses badly, we will get our people's vote and can get it right this time. Yes, I know Jo Swinson, leader of the Liberal Democrats, has been saying that she won't support Labour's plans for people's vote, but I think that's just election campaign talk, not her actual intention. That makes no sense on any level. Once the general election is over and the seats have been arranged, I think they're going to go back to some more sensible discussions. If not much changes, then we'll just have to see based on the precise nature of the balance of power in the new hung parliament. But the point is that the results of the general election will have a profound and predictable effect on how Brexit unfolds or unravels over the following year. There is no immediate future of a UK having a close relationship with Europe outside of the EU because there is no political will for that outcome. There is only remaining and a hard Brexit. And it's important that people understand that. Yes, I know Jeremy Corbyn wants his close relationship, but outside of the EU, though he has not yet published any details of how he imagines this will work. But he doesn't have the backing of his parliamentary party, wider membership, momentum, the majority of the unions, or indeed voters for the outcome. And he certainly doesn't have other parties in Parliament who want that outcome either. So it's a no-deal Brexit, or it's remaining a member. preferably with a public vote that settles the issue once and for all, so we can actually work to rebuild the damage already caused, which, as with all acts of destruction, will always take longer to mend than it took to break. What we can't do is just hope that Parliament would continue to block the worst forms of Brexit if Boris Johnson remains Prime Minister. What we need to do is to ensure that Boris Johnson does not make it to Christmas as Prime Minister. Anything else is to potentially, not definitely, but potentially lose control of the process to certifiable lunatics. So now that Johnson has made it clear that he wants a majority to pursue a path of a no-deal Brexit in 2021, the lines have been drawn for the general election. But anyway, I hope you found the video interesting. Please click the like button if you did. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for further details. And until next time, I'll see you later.